Welcome to Community Cop. My name is Julian Harper, one of the co-founder members of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. I'm here today with my two co-hosts. First of all, Noel Leader.
Peace, family.
Second of all, Michael Greys, aka Big Mike.
Namaste.
And as you guys know, we always have our in-house historian with some historical pieces. Michael, 9/12/77 was the transition of Stephen Biko.
Yes, one of the all-time great warriors we produced in South Africa. He was the leader of the Black Consciousness Movement. He admired, actually, his vision traveled all the way to the shores of America, and he watched the Black Power movement as well as the Civil Rights movement, but he really identified with the Black Power movement and led the Black Consciousness movement in South Africa. And of course, to the chagrin of the Praetorian regime, the heinous regime of South Africa, they killed him. But we should not forget his contribution. While, yes, there were people that looked up to Mandela, the young people looked up to Steve Biko. And Mandela wasn't the only leader there. Obviously, he was one of the leaders in the ANC, but the PAC was very popular. And there was a host of other movements that Steve Biko had grown up in, and he died, unfortunately, at the hands of all of our enemies, the government of South Africa, the white minority, white supremacist government of South Africa.
Okay. Michael, also 3/15/63, the anniversary of the 4 little girls that were killed in 16th Street Baptist Church.
Yeah, you know, it is etched in my mind, and I once asked, it was September a few years ago, and at a UAN meeting, and I just said to Alton Maddox, I just said to him one day, I said, 9/15/1963. And without hesitation, he said, 4 little girls bombed in Birmingham, Alabama. So I know for Southerners, people who were born in the Deep South, like Alton Maddox, that date is forever etched in stone in his mind and many of their minds. Well, some of us remember 9/15/1963, where 4 white supremacist KKK members chose to bomb that church, and it was 4 little girls downstairs at Sunday school singing and praying to the Lord, which meant nothing to them. As the bomb exploded, it killed them. These 4 little girls, I'm going to take the time. That's why I was short on the history piece instead of going into a lot of other things, because I want to call their names. And the graphics will show you later their very faces, but we need to know their names. The names are Cynthia Wellesley, 14 years old. Carol Robinson, 14 years old. Ada Mae Collins, 14 years old. And Denise McNear, 11 years old. 4 little angels who were praying to God himself and singing. And they were taken down by 4 low-down, dirty cowards, and I'm going to give you their names of these 4 cowards. Thomas Edward Blanton, Herman Frank Cash, Robert Edward Chambers, who was the leader, and Bobby Frank Cherry. Those are the 4 KKK members who killed those little girls. The South should be ashamed of itself for them getting away with it. It wasn't like law enforcement did not know who they were. They knew very well who they were. They were identified. They were exonerated in a trial. Many years later, a couple of them were prosecuted for civil rights violations, but with respect to the homicide itself, all 4 men went scot-free. That was Southern justice then, and unfortunately, that's Southern justice now.
Facts.
Right, and that's they have no sense of religion when it comes to killing black folks. It's just like in Charleston church shooting when the members and non-members were in church praying, and this young white man came in and murdered members who were of the church who were in there praying. So this isn't something that has stopped since then. So Michael, thank you for that piece.
Oh, but I'm sorry, I just said it wrong. I said that's Southern justice, as if the Midwest and the Northeast and everybody's exempt. I'm very sorry, and normally, Noel, you catch things like that, but I don't know why you didn't catch that. But it's not Southern. That's just the white man's way.
Right, exactly, because Dylan Ruth, who was the murderer in Charleston, followed those same tenets when it came to killing our people while they're in there praying and worshiping God. Noel, Edward Alexander Bouchet from what's now known as Yale University. Doctor, I should say.
Yes, I just want to mention real briefly of one of the exemplary members of our community, Edward Alexander Bouchet, who I was very surprised that Michael, the historian hitman, was familiar with his history when I mentioned it earlier. I really should not have been surprised. But for those of you who don't know, he was the first documented African-American who received a doctorate degree in physics, received a doctorate degree, but he received his doctorate degree in physics. And this is in 1876. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to point his history out is because the 13th Amendment of the Constitution that was adopted on December 18th, 1865, so close to when he entered Yale University and graduated, that we ought to take note as African Americans of the genius of our people. Now, his father was an enslaved African, evidently denied of all of the rights, including that to an education, perhaps, not even allowed to read. But here his son, the next generation, was a graduate of a university, Yale University, with a doctorate degree in physics, which is not an easy subject. So, this shows the genius of African people, and if allowed, given the opportunity to be successful in education and other areas of life, who knows where we will be today as a people. Here, this individual, Edward Alexander Bouchet, one generation out of slavery, was a graduate of Yale University. So we ought to commend him and also try to get our youth to duplicate his efforts under the circumstances that he did it in, which is phenomenal.
All right, gentlemen, thank you for those historical pieces. I know that our viewing audience truly appreciates the information and the research done into these historical pieces, so we appreciate it. I'm going to start with the case in Oklahoma where a white male was stopped by police. Michael?
Yeah, well, in this particular case, this is Tulsa. I want to be specific. This is Tulsa, Oklahoma. Certainly those who know it know what Tulsa, Oklahoma represents. That's formerly known as Black Wall Street, and that's the area that we developed and had businesses, houses, and everything one could imagine that a nation should have, had all of those elements, and it was taken, systematically removed in the 1920s under white oppression. But in any event, in this particular case, the video was just released by a judge's order on the case of David Ware. He was stopped by two police officers. Sergeant Craig Johnson was killed by him. They stopped him, and he refused to get out of the car.
Step out of the car. I cannot be any more clear than that.
They tried several times. When you see the video, it's rather graphic. They're trying to get him out of the car, and he was refusing to get out of the car. So they tased him after several verbal commands. This is a white man, by the way.
I'm not going to shoot you. I'm going to tase you. There is a difference. What the Get out of the car! Get out of the car!
They tased him. He still wouldn't get out of the car after being tased. They hit him with pepper spray. And it bothered him, but not to the point where he had to surrender. They grabbed him by both arms, and when they pulled him out of the car, they pepper sprayed him again, and he fell back into the seat. And then when he got up again, somehow, according to them, he reached under, because I don't think he took their weapon. He reached under the seat, pulling out a weapon, killed the sergeant, and wounded the other police officer. Now, they were able to catch him after that, but he survived. So he killed the sergeant, almost killed the other police officer in Tulsa, and he survived. Now, Tulsa, Oklahoma is where our graphics department last week, you showed the scene where Terrence Crutcher was killed by police officer Betty Shelby. When she killed him because his car stopped in the middle of the highway and it died on him. And so he flagged down the police officers, and they in turn she ordered him to go back into his car. And when he walked back, she blew his brains out while her husband was in a police helicopter overhead telling her that looks like a bad guy. And she just shot him and killed him. He said, be careful, it looks like a bad guy. Now, I don't know what a bad guy looks like from a helicopter. He was a black guy, but he told her it was a bad guy, and they killed him. Well, here you have a white guy that was arrested. You're not going to believe this, Julian. He was arrested. He had 14 run-ins with police officers in Tulsa. He survived 14 run-ins, and 14 years ago in 2006, the very same sergeant he killed, he spit on the sergeant and was locked up in 2006 and had several run-ins since 2006. When they stopped him this time, he resisted, and he ended up killing that same sergeant who he spit on in 06 and almost killed the other officer. And they still brought him in without killing him. That's my point, that white flesh is so treasured in law enforcement that even though you kill a white sergeant and almost kill the other arresting officer, he still was brought in without harm.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you brought this case up, and we all know why you did, because, you know, we, throughout the nation, we're seeing these contradictory responses by members of law enforcement to African Americans, many times unarmed, many times accused of committing violations at best, traffic infractions, and they wind up in a life and death situation with police officers. Now, when you contrast that with so many videos, which anybody can pull up on YouTube, so many stories where white men engaged in criminal acts and armed are apprehended by police officers on many occasions. So, you know, our community has a right to be suspicious of officers' motives when they approach African Americans, you know, who they feel or believe are engaged or about to be engaged in some kind of activity, be it crime or violation. But we always see an overly aggressive approach by these police officers when the suspect is black, you know, in contrast to that when the suspect is white. So white skin privilege definitely extends itself in the minds of police officers, many police officers, to white criminals. And, you know, we talk about Dylan, Julian, when you talked earlier about he went to a church and murdered, I think it was 9 people.
Yes.
Yeah,
he was apprehended. Not only was he apprehended, but they bought something for him to eat. We talked about the white suspect who had just shot and murdered 2 individuals. and was walking past police officers with a machine gun strapped across his chest, and police officers went right past him. So these kind of facts have to be pointed and have to be dealt with. And they should be made a real serious issue on law enforcement handling in view of African-American defendants or suspects in contrast to the way they deal with whites.
Well, you know, and this is not just something that happens in the South. This is a nationwide problem. You know, even in New York, there was a police officer who, a male white, attempted to stab him with a knife, and fortunately the knife hit the officer's shield. And this man was not shot. He was apprehended without any injuries. But again, when law enforcement encounters members of our community, they have this view of that allows them to dehumanize members of our community. So the response when they are either apprehending, making an arrest, or even sometimes it's even an encounter that's less than arrest. Maybe it's an emotionally disturbed person, but they have this ability to dehumanize the people that they deal with in our communities. And unfortunately, many times members of our community lose their lives in these encounters. But all right, thank you.
Let me just point out real quick that a lot of people in our community attribute sometimes these responses to officers being afraid of African Americans, afraid of black skin. But I would challenge that it's more that they hate African Americans, because when these police officers walk in our community, when they, you know, all bravado, and you know, if you ever watch the manner about which they approach members of our community, it's not out of fear. They don't fear. They have the weapons, they have the guns, they have the support, they have the backup. So it's not motivated by fear. It's mostly motivated by hatred and total disregard for African Americans. You know, so I don't want a lot of people to get that twisted, because I observed many police officers during my career as a police officer walk through Harlem, and they're not afraid. I mean, if they didn't have the shield on, if they didn't have the support, and if they didn't have the gun, yes, they would be definitely afraid. Many times they wouldn't even walk some of these communities. When you have all of that shield, the vest, and you're approaching somebody who's a lot of times younger than you, don't have any weapons, you know, it's not motivated out of fear. It's motivated out of total disregard for African Americans.
All right. Noel.
Yes, sir.
We know that the Breonna Taylor case has just been settled financially, economically, through a lawsuit. I believe it was $12 million that the lawsuit was settled for. I know that you have a very strong thought on the entire settlement of that case. Your thoughts?
Yes, this is one of the reasons why, you know, we frequently criticize, you know, whether it's Reverend Sharpton or Crump, Attorney Crump, or Sharpton's attorney. What's his name?
Benjamin Crump.
No, what's the Jewish attorney Sharpton used?
Rubenstein.
A lot of times, these individuals get these cases, and it's my opinion that they sell out aspirations for the family and the community to receive justice for civil compensation. You know, I believe attorneys like Crump, the reason why he's able to practice law around the country, and the reason why he gets a lot of these cases, because he has these private meetings with district attorneys, and he agrees to settle. You know, and I think the settlement, and we talked about this frequently in our program, the quick settlement of these cases, I think, is the mistake. It's a tactical mistake. We've always said that these cases should not be settled. You should wait and see if the district attorney or special prosecutor is going to prosecute these officers. And if they fail to do so, you should be able to depose these police officers in the civil jurisdiction. You know, in this particular case, you know, we said on this program that the police officer who appealed to the judge for a no-knock warrant claimed that the postmaster told him that he had delivered, or his post office had delivered mail narcotics to this particular address. This is what the officer said in his application to the judge for a no-knock warrant. The postmaster, the post inspector said he didn't say that, so he don't know where the officer got that from. So if the district attorney's office or if the special prosecutor in this particular case do not prosecute these officers and decides to drop the case, you know, the family's attorney and civil jurisdiction have the opportunity to sequester these police officers and depose them and question them as it relates to this particular point. Also, the mayor and the police commissioner stated that none of the officers had body cameras. Yet now we're finding out that when you look at some of the pictures of the officers that was taken immediately after the shooting, one officer had a body camera on his shoulder, and another officer had the mount. Now the body camera was missing, which, as I stated, the attorney for the family and the civil case can ask him about that. Why wasn't the camera on there? He had the mount. So, you know, we have great reason to believe that the mayor and the police commissioner are lying as it relates to body cameras, of these officers having body cameras. Perhaps they just don't like what's on the cameras. This particular case was settled very quickly, within months, which is unusual. And I suspect that the jurisdiction, you know, over there wants this to just go away. And they want everybody to be satisfied that the family received $12 million, which was a huge, according to what's normally given out, settlement, giving out $12 million. But I think they just want this case to go away. I think it's a tactical error. No, I don't even think it's an error. I think it's intentional. I think the Crumps conspire with prosecutors not to make a big noise about these particular cases, hurry up and settle these cases so they can go away. And I think it's, it's an error for them to negate the possibility that there might not be a prosecution in this particular case. And I just want to finally say that for those who don't think that you can get some good information over these civil cases, you just have to ask Bill Cosby, who's sitting in jail right now because of the comments he made in the civil proceeding, because of admissions that he made in the civil proceeding. So once you settle the case, you no longer have the opportunity to proceed and question these police and depose these particular officers. Ask for, police records, ask for documents, get to the bottom of whether or not they were actual cameras. The district attorney don't ask none of these questions, then it's all lost. And the goal should not be compensation, even though the family has a right to receive compensation, but the goal should be to receive justice. And there's a difference between receiving compensation and receiving justice.
Right.
Well, first of all, and I concur with everything you said, Noel, the Ben Crump gets 1/3 of that. Let me just say that from the outset to those that don't know. He gets a minimum of 1/3 of whatever the family is awarded. What did he do to get 1/3 of their pain and suffering? What did he do? Now, Ben Crump is allowed to travel state to state, unlike other attorneys who are only allowed to practice in their particular area and can once in a while venture somewhere else in another state with another attorney and work that state. He is on a good guy list that you can't find anywhere because in America, in all 50 states, Ben Crump is their guy. He is not our guy. Benjamin Crump, attorney at law. He's not attorney at war. That's Alton Maddox. He's attorney at law. He is their guy. He's Sharpton's attorney. He's white people's attorney. He's not a black folks' attorney. Because look at the classic case in Crown Heights, to get ahead of myself. In Crown Heights, Limerick Nelson was prosecuted first before in the Crown Heights incident. Well, after that, what happened? His brother sued New York City. After Dinkins was no longer in office, he sued New York City, and it was Mayor Rudolph Giuliani who awarded him recompense in the form of millions of dollars, claiming that Mayor Dinkins led what they call a pogrom, state-sponsored violence, that he allowed it and that he engineered the whole thing, as if black people were attacking Jews as opposed to the other way around. And that somehow they inferred that, they actually said it, that Dinkins made the police go fishing while black folks were throwing cans and bottles at Jewish people, which was a lie. So in any event, there's a settlement and no charges against the police officers in Louisville, Kentucky, as we speak. Now, not only did the person in suing the city, after they sued the city, they sued Kings County for negligence. But that all came after the prosecution of Limerick Nelson, the black man who they allege killed, you know, the Jewish student. So obviously somebody got it backwards. So in this particular case, Benjamin Crump is their attorney. He goes and gets an award. He tells the family right away to encourage people to stop protesting. So they bring the temperature in the community down to a manageable temperature. And that's what they're assigned to do. And he just gets pain. He gets paid for the pain and suffering that's being done all over the country. And he just goes from place to place. And so, Noel, when you say he has agreements with district attorneys, yes, he has agreements with district attorneys that he's not going after the police officer. He just wants a check for the family, and he gets 1/3 of what they get. But he also has those agreements with that local mayor, and which I know you know, and also that governor. So whether it's the governor, whether it's the mayor, whether it's the district attorney's office, whether it's that police department, he has these agreements all in place, and everybody understands he's on a good guy list. He's their guy. He's not going to hurt the local police officers. That's why, whether it's here in New York, the PBA, or whether it's police unions all over the country, none of them bother Benjamin Crump. None of them attack him. Newspaper media people don't attack him. He's considered a civil rights attorney. Now, the attorney at war, who was a real civil rights attorney, Alton Maddox, he's not that. He's not Thurgood Marshall. He's not Charles Hamilton Houston. He's not even Attorney Gray. He used to be the attorney for Dr. King in the civil rights movement. And he was the same attorney that allowed Emmett Till's mother to remove his body because the state of Mississippi wasn't going to let her bring the body back to Chicago from Mississippi. So he was the one that was able to go to court and get the body and bring it back to Chicago. That's a civil rights attorney. But a guy that's just going around getting a paycheck, and I heard Sharpton call him an attorney at war, and he knows the real attorney at war got him out of jail when he was looking at a 70-count indictment where he would still be in jail to this day. It was the brilliance of Alton Maddox that got him out of jail, and why he's walking around now making millions of dollars. He should never call anybody the attorney at war, and shouldn't allow anybody to call anybody other than Attorney Maddox the attorney at war, which the people gave him. Alton did not give that to himself. The people gave him that and told him he's the attorney at war. There's only one.
Now, Noel, let me ask you a question. When we talk about these cases and we have the media describing these particular incidents, why is it that we never hear the perspective from the prosecuting attorneys, but we hear all the information that's given by the attorneys that are supposedly assigned to the families in a civil lawsuit, as opposed to the information that relates to the either illegal stops or information that the investigation is being conducted by the prosecutor, which is the state, who is supposed to be looking into these cases. But we constantly hear from the civil attorneys whose goal is to get a financial settlement for the family, as opposed to looking into the criminal aspect of the case that may have been, or the crimes that may have been committed by law enforcement who caused the untimely death of members of our community.
Well, of course, the prosecutor will say that they can't speak because it's an ongoing prosecution. So they handball a lot of this information to the defense attorney. Of course, in the case of Attorney Crump, his job is to placate our community, make it appear as if he's defending our sisters, Breonna Taylor's rights, and then defending the family, when in all actuality, I think there's some collaboration between him and the prosecutor's office. You know, so I think the prosecutor's office, Julian, to answer your question, allows individuals like Crump to give this information to make it appear as if he's defending our sisters' rights and defending the family, and you know, de facto defending the rights of the African American community who was called out for justice in this particular case. But as I stated earlier, you know, his strategy is an errant one. You know, I think he's intelligent to know that it's an errant one. You know, I don't understand the pressure that a lot of these families may be under to accept these financial settlements, even before it's been determined whether or not there's going to be a prosecution. As I stated, you know, you can hold back on the settlement. I mean, you know, the city and the state is going to settle sometime. But if the primary objective is to get justice, we should first see if there's going to be a prosecution of these officers. And if the district attorney decides to prosecute the officers, and the officers are prosecuted, or the special attorney general decides, or a special prosecutor decides to prosecute these officers, you know, then that's one thing. But if there's going to be no prosecution, then and you settle these cases, of course, there's gag orders involved in a lot of these settlements, and you don't get to find out exactly what happened. You never get to put the officer on a hot seat to make him explain his actions. You never get to sequester police documents, you know, whether it's the 911 tapes, you know, what did you say, what did you do, then have them verify that. So if the district attorney or a special prosecutor decides not to prosecute, you settle the case, then for all intent and purposes, it's gone. And I think that's an error, because when you look at the marches, whether it's, you know, individuals crying out saying that Black Lives Matter, if you look at the protests, everyone's demanding justice. Now, we believe the family deserves to be compensated. What should be in the forefront is a call for justice. If there's not going to be any prosecution, you know, if the district attorney, and a lot of times their investigations is quiet, it's closed door, the family or the community never knows why the officers weren't prosecuted. They'll give some vague statement saying upon the completion of our investigation, we find the officers did nothing wrong. At that time, the family has an opportunity to say, okay, we're suing you. We wanted to depose these police officers. We wanted to question them as it relates to their actions. And I stated earlier, and I'll give the ball back to you, Julian, we know at least now that the officer, there's a likelihood that the officer lied in his application to the judge, received this no-knock warrant, which is prosecutorial, it's perjury, he perjured himself, because the postal inspector said of Metro, you know, that he never told the officers that. And we know that there's a great possibility that there was footage. So we want to see the footage. But by settling this case, if the district attorney doesn't prosecute, we may never find we may never find the answers to those questions. It's a tactical error, but I think it was intentional, because Attorney Crump is more concerned about his relationship with these district attorneys and receiving a financial settlement, as opposed to, you know, victims or the community receiving justice.
And I'll buttress your remark by saying that Benjamin Crump goes for the paycheck, as opposed to seeing that Breonna Taylor was going to be murdered a second time by the police, because they went to an ex-boyfriend and spoke to the ex-boyfriend, trying to get her tied up in a drug scandal. So they were trying to infer that she was part and parcel, a part of a drug ring, and told the boyfriend he would get less time if he cooperated with them. It would work out for him. He refused to do it and exposed it, and still Benjamin Crump did nothing. So this only shows you he's about a paycheck, that because by that he should have now gone after the police department, going after anybody in the district attorney's office who was offering a deal for the ex-boyfriend to lie about her conduct.
Well, you know, and Mike, I'm glad you brought that up. There is a relationship with these police departments and these district attorneys' offices who are mandated to conduct investigations in wrongful death or murders by police officers of members of the community. New York police unions are backing GOP Senate candidates. Over 23 different New York police unions are backing these candidates. And when I talk about that, we're looking at a political group that is very staunch when it comes to supporting police unions. Even when we talk about these particular cases, we have cases like this where we have the justice system looking into these cases, but they never find any fault in law enforcement when it comes to the the unjust killings of members of our community. How can we expect to receive justice from either the police department, a judicial system that constantly operates from a position that will not fairly investigate, prosecute cases when we talk about the killing of members of our community?
Well, I mean, we need to really seriously look at the incestuous relationship that exists between police officers and district attorneys, police unions, and district attorneys and judges' office. A lot of time that relationship and the sympathy that many of these district attorneys and special prosecutors and judges have with police officers, and that's why when we talked about Crump during our last story, that's why it's so important for these defense attorneys to be so vigilant because of these relationships. You're supposed to be the professional that can navigate and determine when things aren't going right. Then you're supposed to come to the family, to the public to expose them. Because Julian, as you mentioned, there's a very strong relationship between police unions, be it the Fraternal Order of Police, which is a national union, or the PBA in New York City and other unions. Is a very strong relationship between these unions and prosecutors. So when you have attorneys who don't represent our community, I mean, it's evident enough that we're working at a disadvantage when you have the politicians that work in conjunction with these unions and these police officers and the prosecutors and judges. We're already at a disadvantage. That's why it's incumbent, and that's why in the last story, Julian, when we spoke about Crump, it's so important that these defense attorneys are so vigilant to expose the things that are going on. But when they're complicit with the whole process, we're really at a disadvantage. And that's why we very rarely receive justice in these cases, especially when you got these Crumps going all around the nation and grabbing up all of these big headline cases, at a minute notice.
I agree. I just think that we should, the same way you see a lot of passion with respect to people running for mayor in various cities, we need to have some of that same energy to run for district attorney offices, and we'll be better off if we get more district attorneys that look like us. And of course, if you have backbone and you have a love for our people and respect the legacy that was laid out before all of us, whose shoulders we standing on, as Noel started the show talking about the brilliant brother Bouchet. We need people like that can step forward and do our ancestors well.
Absolutely. Michael, let me ask you a question. We were talking last week about all of the incidents that are occurring. We have multitudes of people speaking in the media, and you mentioned something about these Black apologists.
Yeah, I've been watching the media a lot lately, and I'm seeing a pattern that's really dispiriting, and that's Black folks apologizing every way you look. Now, when you look at it, I scribbled down a few names of people, and Nick Cannon, he apologized about, they called it so-called anti-Semitic remarks when he said something to the effect about the original Jews were Black, something along those lines. And he talked about or mentioned conspiracies. You had Jesse Jackson, who apologized for years for referring to New York City as Town. Tracy Morgan had to apologize for gay slurs. Now, he's a comedian. I always understood, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I always understood that comedians have, what is it called, poetic license, I think the term is, that you are allowed to crack jokes about anybody. Now, Nick Cannon ain't apologizing for using the N-word. Every other joke got the N-word in it, but he's not criticized for that. But he can't mention Jews. Now, you have Tracy Morgan, like I said, he cracked jokes about gay people, was forced to apologize. You had Kevin Hart, who had to apologize for saying that he hoped his son doesn't turn out gay. Now, what black man has to apologize for that? A black man has the right to say, after 4 centuries of oppression, I hope my son does not turn out gay. And now they force you to apologize. Now you can't host the Academy Awards and all of that because they're forcing you again and again and again to keep saying you sorry. Well, did Jews ever apologize for their role in the Holocaust of enslavement? Now, I'm intentionally using the word Holocaust because we are not allowed to use the word Holocaust. Now, I know our people use other terms and, you know, to describe the horrors of enslavement. The Ma'afa is a term often used to indicate a great tragedy. But when somebody says to me, the Holocaust, I will always say, what Holocaust are you talking about? There is no the Holocaust. If there was a the Holocaust, then it's the Holocaust of enslavement that lasted for centuries, that destroyed over 100 million of our people. And that's the most conservative number in my research that I've come to, 100 million. That's what Malcolm said. That's what many other scholars said. It was 100 million. That's a conservative number. Hakeem Al-Abudi, who lived longer than Malcolm and had the ability, he came much later, to do more research. He said 250 million were killed over the past 4 centuries. Now, Dr. Collins said it was in excess of 600 million. You pick the number, but all of those numbers to me sound like more than 6 million. So how is 6 million the Holocaust when well over 100 million, 200 million, 250 million black people were killed over centuries? Now, all sorts of white ethnic groups played a role in that. They're not apologizing to us. What are we apologizing for? To anybody. We should not apologize for anybody for us standing up, because the pain and suffering, we've seen our first, second, third born, we've seen wives, daughters, sons, everybody killed, hung, and we apologize. No good. You don't have to apologize. If you say that the Jewish religion comes out of Africa, you are correct. Dr. Clark, where's the scholars who took the place of Dr. Clark and Dr. Ben, so many others? And Dr. Ben was Hebrew, by the way, that can verify that historically. I could take you through the steps to show you what Nick Cannon was saying had, it was accurate. He just didn't say it right. But yet we find ourselves apologizing. We can't make a statement and white folks come at you and we just start trembling and shaking. Like the wind blowing, we blow with that wind. I'm just saying we need to stand up. Where's our scholars when we need them, our lawyers? They should tell us we shouldn't be apologizing for anything to anybody. Look at the roles in Hollywood. Look at Step and Fetch It. Look at Mammy. Look at Aunt Jemima and all of this stuff that we grew up. telling us our lips are ugly, our skin, our hair, our nose ain't right, lips ain't right. Who apologized to us for any of that? Like Malcolm said, who told you that your hair and your nose, your lips, your skin was ugly? They ain't apologizing to us, damn it. What we apologizing to them for?
I agree wholeheartedly with what you said, Mike, because you should only apologize if you say or do something that's incorrect. You definitely shouldn't apologize when you say or you speak your truth, and some people may find some offense to it. But in many of these instances, it's individuals who white society considers privilege. You know, you may be talking about your black entertainers, your sports figures, your politicians who receive a paycheck. And the most honorable Elijah Muhammad one time said a paycheck is paying somebody to stay in check. So in their eyes, when you speak a truth, especially if it's a black truth, you know, they find objection to it, and they want to push you in the corner because they consider themselves paying you to stay in check, and they don't expect you to say anything that they might find offensive, or whether it's true or not. They don't care about that. If it offends them and they're paying you a salary, be it entertainment, sports, or you know, you have a political office, you know, they expect you to speak their truth. So I agree wholeheartedly with you, Michael. A man or woman should never apologize unless he think he said or did something that's incorrect, and it's appropriate. I just want to mention real quick, Julian, if I can, recently LA Sheriff Alex Villanova challenged LeBron James, you know, to offer some money, right, $175,000, matching funds, you know, for the person who recently shot 2 police officers, as if to shame him or back him up, since he's come out and made so many strong statements in regards to Black Lives Matter movement and as it relates to his police criminality and injustice. So this sheriff attempt to back him up, you know, is similar to apologizing, but trying to back him up to a corner to make him take money out of his pocket to contribute to this matching fund. And if LeBron James voluntarily chooses to do it, so be it. But he shouldn't be shamed, you know, or attempt to be shamed by this particular sheriff, you know, to do what the sheriff wanted. And really, the sheriff is attempting to mock him, you know. But you know, these are the things, Michael, as you stated, that you know, society tries to impose on many of our athletes, entertainers, sport figures, etc.
Well, you know, one of the things that I find appalling is, or troubling, I should say, is when I see on the media when members of our community are either murdered, assaulted, or somehow violated by law enforcement, the families of these victims find themselves crying and praying with the same people who were in charge of securing the safety of the members of our community. And trust me, I understand the power of prayer. I agree with the power of prayer. I support those members of the families who are praying. But I find it difficult to watch them pray with these people who don't seem genuine in their prayers for the members that of our community have been subjected to the ills and the killings by these entities or these law enforcement entities. But one thing I did want to say, Michael, is when you talk about these sports figures, we were talking about Naomi Osaka, who ended up winning the U.S. Open, and she stood strong and staunch in her support for members of our community who had been killed at the hands of police unjustly. So I just wanted to give a shout out to her because, I mean, that is a 22-year-old sister who is strong and solid in her support for our community. And there's a multitude of other sports figures and athletes and I guess actors who are supporting our community. So I just want to let them know and say that I do support them and appreciate the support that they give to our community.
And I concur. Certainly, she was outstanding. I watched her this weekend, and I saw her win. I called Noel and told him that she won, and I said to him, "Guess what she had on when she came out there to the court, and he said, what? I said, Tamir Rice. That's what she was wearing. Tamir Rice. So she spoke to a situation that so many avoided when she brought up the 12-year-old who was killed by Cleveland police officers, Loman and the other officer who shot and killed Tamir Rice, 12-year-old boy, within 2 seconds from exiting their vehicle. And so that was good of her to stand like that. And the announcer tried to trap her by asking her what was behind all these messages, because every day on the court, but she had 7 tournaments, 7 times she went out there, she had a different one on every day. So he said to her, you know, I noticed you wear a different person every day on your mask and t-shirt and stuff. So he said, what message are you trying to send? She said, what did you get from it? He said, well, there was a lot of things, but what were you trying to say? She said, well, exactly that. I was trying to say a lot of things, and I was trying to get out that message to provoke dialogue and make people talk about and mention these situations that I was wearing, which I thought was strong, especially in light of Serena not saying anything, trying to hide by saying she has personal religious beliefs which prevent her from speaking out like that. But that's crap. She spoke out when she felt she was being shortchanged on the money and felt her and her sister should make more money. Her religion didn't stepping away from her, pointing that part out. And so I would just say that here you got Naomi Osaka, who said she's a black woman, and you got Serena Williams, who's married to a white man. And once you sleep in white, you start thinking white. And unfortunately, that's why she had nothing to say, because she sleeps white, Serena. And Naomi Osaka, she said she's a black woman and proud of it.
Right. I'm going to try to speed it up because I know we're running out of time. Noel, Roderick Walker was assaulted by Clayton County Sheriff's deputy. He was driving in a car, and he was in a car, let me rephrase that. He wasn't even driving. But I'll let you continue the story before I.
Right. This is a video that is making its way throughout the country and then also worldwide. Roderick Walker was a passenger in a Lyft vehicle when the police pulled over the driver, claiming that he had a broken tail light. Now, for whatever reason, the officer's attentions shifted from the driver of the vehicle, where he claims he observed an infraction, broken tail light, to a passenger, which is Brother Roderick Walker. For some reason, he demanded Brother Walker show him his ID. I don't understand what the protocol was for that. He should be able to explain it if it was justified. Brother Walker, for whatever reason, claimed he didn't have his ID on him, and they got into some kind of confrontation where both officers proceeded to assault him. So all on the video, his kids were present, his wife was present. They had, once again, no regard, and they weren't motivated by fear, family. These officers didn't fear this brother. They had disregard for him. And I would say that you don't treat someone that you don't know in that manner unless you hate them. So that's what they're motivated by. And they proceed to whip him, to beat him. You see his injuries in the aftermath. One officer who they haven't named thus far was fired because, he didn't follow a proper police protocol. Brother Walker was charged with 2 counts of hindering law enforcement and 2 counts of battery, where the officers claimed that he assaulted them. But once again, we have this situation, and we talked about it previously, a black man not engaged in any criminality, no crime, unarmed, was handled so viciously by 2 white police officers, and they should have been arrested. The officer definitely deserved to be terminated. But he should have been arrested. This is unacceptable, and they claim there's going to be an investigation. That is an ongoing investigation, just as they did in the Breonna Taylor. She was murdered in March, and we're still waiting for people's investigation. They say these investigations because they want our attention to be offered, and then they come back and say the officers' actions, although it was inappropriate, it didn't amount to crime, it didn't amount to criminality. So we'll see, what happens in this case. But it's once again you know, something that should really captivate the attention of our community of the way these police officers are responding to members of our community not engaged in any crime.
Right. You know, and you know, only because we're running out of time, I want to get two more stories, and I know there's a story that you have, Mike, that I want to get to. But in New York City and Queens, a black female jogger was running down the street in Woodside area of Queens. As she was jogging, she was attacked verbally and physically by a female white. Female white told this black female jogger, "Go back to Africa, get out of here," and she threw a bottle at her. Now, with all of this racial tension, and I don't know if I really want to phrase it as that, as racial tension, there's an attack on African people throughout this entire nation that seems to be fueled by the attacks on our community by law enforcement. So it seems that everyone is finding the ability to join in this massive disregard for African people. Mike, you know, I mean, when does it come, and I'm saying it this way, but I can imagine what your response is going to be. When does it come where members of our community cannot even jog down the street without being attacked for being black, being told to go back to Africa?
Well, there's always been concerns about our ability to move. So movement has always been in question. We might not here in New York or other places have pass laws like South Africa had, where you had to have a pass and be able to identify yourself immediately. But nothing has changed in terms of that. You know that you weren't able to move off the plantation, and Paul Robeson passport was taken, Muhammad Ali's passport was taken. So movement has always been a recurring theme with respect to black people. So we should always be mindful. If you go into the wrong neighborhood right now, especially at night, or even during the day, a police officer might ask you, "What's your business here?" So I'm not surprised at all about our inability to move.
Right. And what is alarming, Julian, you know, we not only have to concern ourselves with the inappropriate behavior and responses of police officers, now we have so many incidents involving Karens or white women whose interactions with members of the African-American community, be it male, female, be it children, are hostile and aggressive. I don't think it's nothing new. I think the only thing that is new is that now these images are being captured on film, on video, because so many of us have cameras, you know, in our telephones. I think that when you look at this particular incident, it's outrageous. It's uncalled for. She wasn't provoked. The sister was just jogging past her, and she had this emotional outburst. You know, as she should be, you know, dealt with, you know, by the authorities, because her actions were definitely inappropriate. And the sister just continued on her way and jogging. She was so surprised and shocked. You know, she just continued on her job. But it's, you know, like I said, this is some of the same that we're getting. We not only have to concern ourselves with police, now we have to concern ourselves with inappropriate actions of white women.
Well,
just remember, Ahmaud Arbery, that's the same thing that happened to him. He was just jogging and lost his life.
Right, and the NYPD hate crime is supposed to be looking into it. We have very little time, Michael, but I know that you want to talk about a lawsuit by flight attendants.
Yeah, flight attendants have a lawsuit against United Airlines because you have a situation where the airline special charters, they have contracts with the National Football League, the Major League Baseball, college athletics. And on those flights, you know, you're talking about millionaires, primarily black millionaires. United Airlines are utilizing blonde-haired young white women in their 20s to get these flights, as opposed to the lawsuit that was put in to the two women, one black and one Jewish, that had 28 years and 34 years on the job, respectively. These flights are being attended by the flight attendants. Basically, they have that Scandinavian Nordic look, and that's what the airlines want for all these young black millionaires because perhaps they think they are enticing. So they are setting up black people, setting up athletes with these white women as opposed to having whoever the flight should normally get it. These are called plum routes, and they are conducted by young Scandinavian type women that get these flights as opposed to older women. And they white and blonde hair. That's primarily the look.
All right. Okay, family, I'm sorry we're out of time. We're going to give our closing statements. Noel Leader, I'll let you go first.
Lenny Lou, Kitty Cat, Little Mo, love you. I see we've been out of time. Peace, family.
All right. Michael Greys?
Yeah, in this election season, I spoke to a few people about, what they're going to be doing in November. And a lot of United African Movement people told me they're voting for Cynthia McKinney. And I was surprised that so many people, and then I found out that people in Minnesota as well as Alaska, I think she's on the ballot in some of those, in Alaska and maybe in Minnesota. So to me, it's not a waste to vote for Cynthia McKinney. We love and adore. That's one of the strong sisters principle, upright, and black man, black woman, protect the black child, accept your own, and be yourself.
Harper sisters, thanks for watching. I love you. We got to thank Veronica Kitt, Nat Woods, Sheila Berry, Big D. You guys are doing a phenomenal job. Sorry I went over time, but Community Cop family, thanks for watching. Noel, one time real quick.
Peace.
See you next week. All right.